Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Mike McCarthy is the producer behind the boards as we preview the 2018 Northeast Conference. And we'll kick off this 2018 Northeast Conference season preview by taking a look at some of the top storylines heading into the season as we go into our 4-minute offense. The Robert Morris Colonials are going in a new direction with the hiring of head coach Bernard Clark. The Tampa, Florida native comes over from the Albany Great Danes, where he was a defensive coordinator since 2014. Now, he has built his name and reputation on the defensive side of the ball and is looking to instill that same level of both physical and mental toughness in order to help jumpstart this Robert Morris program. Now, this was a program that had a lot of success in the late 90s and in 2010 in this conference, and the hope is that Clark is the guy to lead them back to those glory days in the NEC. Last year in the NEC, we saw two great stories unfold as the season went on. We saw the Bryant Bulldogs with their new head coach James Perry finish on a 4-game winning streak en route to a 6-5 record. We also saw head coach Pete Rosamondo lead his Central Connecticut State Blue Devils to a perfect 6-0 conference record en route to an outright NEC title and a berth in the FCS playoffs. Now, the question is whether or not last year was an anomaly or a sign of things to come for the two programs. And if we're seeing both trend upwards, it just adds to the strength of the NEC as a whole, which would definitely make things interesting in the FCS. And that sort of ties right into the next topic as we enter the season. Is the NEC the conference of sleepers? We tend to think so. Last year you had Bryan and Central Connecticut State. The year before that you had St. Francis as Duquesne. Wagner has had NFL draft picks, most recently Greg Sinat, and Sacred Heart was a playoff participant at points throughout this decade. So to say that this conference only has 7 teams in it, they sure do have a lot of good parity and out of conference competitiveness. That speaks to the outstanding job that the coaches are doing on both the recruiting front and on the field X's and O's. I think we'll see this conference become a 2-team bid conference come FCS playoff time pretty soon. Consistency is everything in college football, and no one has more consistency than Duquesne's junior tailback, A.J. Hines. Hines won the Jerry Rice Award, which is given to the top freshman in the FCS after rushing for just under 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. He followed that up with a 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown effort last year, and with that level of consistency at this level, I think it's safe to say that he's an early season candidate for the Walter Payton Award, which is the FCS equivalent to the Heisman Trophy. What's impressive about Hines is that teams come into games versus the Dukes knowing that they have to stop him in order to win, and they haven't been able to do so in 2 years. Doesn't look like that'll stop in year 3 either. As we get ready to kick off the start of summer workouts and fall camp, we will give you a look around the conference at some of the conference's best, and we'll start by unveiling our all-conference team, beginning with the offensive side of the ball. Our preseason offensive all-NEC team has a ton of explosive talent on it. Bryant's Bryce Wilson is the quarterback on this squad. After an impressive junior campaign, the 6'1", 241-pound former Louisiana Tech Bulldog tossed 24 touchdowns and passed for over 3,300 yards last year. He has a lot of options on his team to get the football to. One in particular is Duquesne's Nahari Crawford, the 5'11", 170-pound senior wideout from Fort Pierce, Florida, hauled in 65 receptions for over 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. Crawford is so smooth in tracking the football and has above average speed with excellent hand-eye coordination, and they're counting on him to have an encore performance this year as the Dukes look to stand atop the NEC. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, and when you look at the second level with linebackers Thomas Costigan of Bryant, Quentin Hampton of Wagner, and Kenneth Keene of Central Connecticut State, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more versatile group of playmakers in the FCS. I also think defensive back Kevin Sears of Sacred Heart is primed for a huge year on the back end. And we talked earlier about Robert Morris head coach Bernard Clark establishing a tough physical mindset with the Colonials. Well, he has a great foundation piece to build that philosophy on in defensive lineman Amir Fenwick. The senior defensive lineman finished last year as the team's defensive MVP after racking up 35 tackles and 6 TFLs. With a premier player up front, it'll be easier for guys at the second and third levels of the Colonials defense to do their job well, which will help the team out as a whole. And rounding out our preseason All-NEC team with the specialist, St. Francis's Andrew Zecca has been one of the more consistent Red Flash players over the course of his career. The 6'2", 190-pound senior defensive weapon finished last year as the first-team All-NEC performer after downing 20 punts inside the 20-yard line while also causing another 23 fair catches. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him have a chance on Sundays with that type of production. Now it's time to take a team-by-team whip around the NEC, and we'll start in Smithfield, Rhode Island with the Bryant Bulldogs. And there's a ton of excitement surrounding the Bulldogs program for the upcoming season. With experience comes efficiency, and second-year head coach James Perry has a ton of experienced and talented players returning. And by experience, I'm talking about the number of seniors on the roster and everyone's second year in the scheme. So it'll be interesting to see how much both will matter during the latter parts of the 2018 season as the schedule gets a lot tougher after September. The Duquesne Dukes hope to use last year's collapse as this year's motivating factor, and there's a good chance that they can make that happen. A good bulk of their roster and playmakers return, including running back A.J. Hines. Defensively, the Dukes look solid on the back end. Duquesne will be counting on a couple of FBS transfers to make significant impacts on the 2018 season, especially quarterback Daniel Parr. This is one of the more well-coached teams in the NEC, and they have a very intriguing start to the season as they open up against UMass. Duquesne looks to be one of the more solid teams in the conference. The team no one is talking about right now are the Wagner Seahawks. Head coach Jason Hotaling has done a masterful job with this program. They're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the FCS, in my opinion. The Seahawks also boast one of the top tailbacks in the subdivision in Ryan Foltz. The cause for concern would be settling in on a quarterback. They have two options in Luke Messier, who played last year after Alex Thompson was injured, and transfer Graham Lindman. Whoever wins that job doesn't have to be a world beater, they just have to be efficient. And if that happens, Wagner could find themselves in the playoffs. Another team with serious playoff aspirations are the St. Francis Red Flash. Head coach Chris Valario's squad missed the postseason last year with a 5-6 record and returned 10 starters on offense. They get back running back Marcus Bagley as well, who was primed for a breakout senior season last year before suffering a preseason injury. The cause for concern will be a secondary that's replacing some studs on the perimeter. However, with a solid front seven intact, it should make that secondary transition a lot easier. Offensively speaking, look for the Red Flash to put up some numbers in 2018. Last year, it was all about the defense for the Central Connecticut State Blue Devils. This year, it'll still be all about the defense, but in a different way. This is where you can expect some growing pains for the Blue Devils as they have to replace a host of terrific players on that side of the ball. As I mentioned on our FCS Opening Drive podcast earlier in the week, the offense of Central Connecticut State will be more than likely leaned on to begin the season until that defense starts to gel. That could end up being a good thing considering what head coach Pete Rosamondo has returning on that side of the ball, and if that defense can get it together quickly, watch out. And speaking of a team that has some defensive questions entering the season, the Sacred Heart Pioneers are not short on talent on that side of the ball, but they are short on experience, which theoretically puts them in the same boat as Central Connecticut State. Now, the difference is that on offense, fifth-year senior quarterback Kevin Duke will have to shoulder much of that responsibility as he'll be breaking in some inexperienced perimeter options. Head coach Mark Nofri has been able to hang his hat on a strong play on both sides of the line of scrimmage and a dependable power running game. If those three things can show up to start the season, the Pioneers can get back on track. And finally, for the Robert Morris Colonials, all is not doom and gloom. I actually think they'll be one of the more improved teams in the subdivision. I thought they brought in some really good talent the last two recruiting cycles, and you should start to see some of that payoff in the win column this season. The offense has to be significantly better if they want to see that come to fruition. The Colonials only averaged a conference low 10.2 points a game on offense last season. So that's a wrap from Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and don't forget to check out and subscribe to the FCS Opening Drive podcast on iTunes and also on SoundCloud, where Dave Hashagen and myself dive deeper into the world of the FCS. And don't forget to subscribe to the Football Game Plan Network on YouTube, where you can find all of our FCS video content at youtube.com/footballgameplan.